All right. I think we may have had a little bit of an interruption, but no worries. All right. So what I'm going to be doing after that little dialogue, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking about, um, your bailout CCR requirements. We see that we have the benefits logistically. It could be used for very deep diving, for the distance, if you're going very far, and or if you're very remote in a very remote area. Instead of bringing compressors, bank bottles, those big K bottles, the 4500 K bottles, you're able to bring rebreather bottles, and you could be able to transfill your gases or your gas requirements. So logistically, a bailout rebreather is an incredible tool for working in very remote, deep, and far locations. It's a lot of benefits on that. So what I'm going to go here, I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between my two cameras. I've got my little screen right here, and we're going to go through the menu, and I'm going to show you guys how we're going to set up the bailout rebreather for diving. And if you guys have any questions, be sure to chime in and throw your questions at me. Hopefully, it won't derail me too much or anything. All right. So when I'm diving on my rebreather, what are some important things that I need to set up in my planning process? So as everyone knows, if we're mixing our gases, our diluent gases, it's very, very important in terms of our decompression obligation that our diluent gases match the same as our back mount unit and as this bailout unit. If they're off by 1%, and if we're diving pretty deep, that can make a big difference, right, in our decompression obligations. So that's a very important factor, that our diluent mixes are as precise and as close to the same as possible. Next are set points. So I know I don't want to get my big nose in the camera, but our set points on our rebreather, it's very important to make sure that they are matching as the same as our back mounted unit. So let's see if I don't get too much glare in the camera. So when I dive into my menu, I always need to make sure that my setup and my set points are going to be the same between the two units. So here we have descent set point. So what is the descent set point? The descent set point is what is the so as we're descending, do we need to add oxygen into the loop? Typically, we do not need to be adding oxygen to the loop because our partial pressure of oxygen is going to go up, right? So say my rebreather set point is at 0.7, and as I'm descending, the unit may be injecting oxygen, right? Because it wants to get to a 0.7 PO2 loop. So this descent set point, we can see that it's at 0.4, which is pretty low. So what's going to happen is that the unit knows that we're in the descending portion of our dive, and it's going to know that, all right, the minimum loop PO2 is going to be 0.4 until we reach the bottom, or as we're descending. Now, is our actual loop PO2 going to be 0.4? No, it's probably going to be pretty high, and we're going to control that by using our automatic diluent valve or our diluent manual add valve, right? But it's an important thing to have turned on, or the descent set point, because it does a very good job of the unit automatically is able to kind of control it. Now, I know that a lot of us, we like to dive our unit manually, and we use the electronics kind of like as a backup. Sometimes you'll say, if you hear the solenoid fire, that means you're not paying attention. Well, the unit does a very, very good job of kind of working and operating, not on its own, but it's going to maintain that set point to what you put it at. So, but what's important in terms of our bailout rebreather is to make sure that if we have our descent set point on, that we have it on both units. We have our PPO2 low at 0.7. I know it's a little hard to see, but we want to make sure that they match both units, right? And so you can see here, I have my FO2 limit of 96%. I want to have that the exact same on my back mounted unit. Now, also don't forget that the unit will automatically switch to your high set point at a certain point in your dive. This is based off of what you have pre-selected in your menu settings on your Liberty Rebreather. This is really important to make sure that both units are the same, because if I'm diving and I have my set point on my primary unit, say 1.0, and then my bailout unit switches to a 1.2, 1.3, is that going to be the same decompression obligation if I have an emergency and have to bail out? No, they're going to be different. So in order to minimize that type of change, I need to be monitoring. Now, as you will be as you're diving, if you have a bailout rebreather, you're going to be monitoring anyways. And we'll talk about those procedures in a moment. But what I want to say here is that you need to make sure that both systems are matching each other, right? So it's really important to state that in kind of our planning mode and our setup mode. So now, when we go into the screen, when we get into the water and we get into the screen, we're going to set up the unit just like we would as if it was our primary unit. So here we have the dive mode, we have bailout standby, then you have manual CCR, and then you have bailout mode. So we put a nice handy CCR, CCR, MCCR, and OC to kind of make that easier. So bailout standby mode. So the first thing it does an oxygen sensor check. So right now you can see I have an old calibration because we haven't dove in this unit since we got back from California. So it's been a couple days. So the first thing it does is it does a sensor check, and then it tells me, oh, your calibration's old, so shame on you. First step, checklist, step 1, is my diluent valve open? And then right now I don't have anything pressurized, so I'm not going to open anything, but I'm going to go through my checklist, step 1. Dill valve open, dill pressure okay, ADV functioning, inflator functioning, right? So these checks are really important to make sure that we go through. This is my splash checklist. Checklist step 2, oxygen valve open, oxygen pressure okay, oxygen manual valve okay. So I'm physically touching these components and firing them, making sure that they're functioning properly. So bailout pressure okay, bailout regulators okay, bailout air. So it's important, even though we're diving with the bailout rebreather, is to have a bailout open circuit source with you as well. It supplements it. So argon valve open, dry suit inflation okay, weights fashion, OPV valve closed, HUD okay, buddy torch okay, torch okay. So like I said before, it's checking and verifying everything. Sometimes it's good to have both computers from both different units at this step together so that I can see, do my set points match? My set point, 0.4, high 1.3, low 0.7. What's my stack time? There's no scrubber in here. My left battery says 8 hours. My right battery says 11 hours. Hopefully that's enough time for this dive. Some people are like, oh man, I need to charge them. So, okay, so we see here, manual mode. Oxygen is not added automatically. That's important to remember. So the unit is not adding oxygen when it is in the bailout CCR mode. Why is it? So it's basing your decompression profile off of the set point that it's on. So it's essentially, it's almost like a standalone CCR computer that just goes off of your set point. So if I'm flying my unit manually and I want to maintain 1.2, or I have my set point at 0.7, but I'm flying my unit and I'm achieving a 1.0 loop PO2, is that going to be the same as my bailout rebreather? No, it's going to be slightly different. So it's important to know that they need to match. All right, so we are in our screen. So we see here, we can see that this, we have our dive time, we have our battery, we can see which one's 8 hours and which one's probably 11 hours. TTS, time to surface, make sure that camera stays in focus. Now we have these 4 icons. What do you guys think those 4 icons are? Hopefully every CCR diver can recognize that right off the bat. So these are our oxygen sensors, and they're based off of the millivolts in the bar. What's in the now it's recording what's in the loop. So in a second, I'll kick it into a demo dive, and it'll simulate what it'll be doing. Actually, I should do that right now. So let's do that. So I'm going to end the dive. Now I'm going to kick it into a demo dive mode. Let's just do handset manipulation. Looks like it's getting foggy, right? Okay. So we're in the demo dive mode, and then I'll go to bailout standby. So now the unit is, we're in our diving mode, and we can see what it's doing. So we have our set point, 0.4. We see the dive time clock going, and then we have our oxygen sensors. Oh, let me see. Oh, looks like I did some. Let me kick it back into different mode. There we go. Right. So in our standby mode, bailout standby. There you go. So we'll go through those checks real quick, and then you can see those screens. All right. So our oxygen sensors, and we have our loop PO2 at the bottom right. Now we have our onboard DIL. We have it selected as air, and then we have our set point at 0.4. Now we see that they don't match, but the unit is not adding oxygen. So what's important is that it will only add we will only add gas. We'll only add diluent off of the ADV. Then if we swap to the other screen, we can see here our main screen of our oxygen sensors, so we can see what they're doing. Now, diving on the unit, what's important to remember is how your unit is set up, right? So we always want to have an open circuit source with us. So when you have an emergency and you switch to the unit, or the actually, let me back up. So the procedures of diving the unit. So we have our unit in bailout mode. So now it is ready to go diving with us. So now we focus on our primary unit. We get the primary unit ready to go, and once that's going, now what are the steps to follow as we begin our dive and descend? So we go through the steps, and then the first check that we do is we need to basically be diving the unit like we're in side mount. So when you're in side mount and you have two cylinders on your adjacent sides, you swap over every couple of minutes. You're balancing the cylinders. And so what you're doing on the rebreather is you're essentially going to be doing you're verifying a function check. So if I jump between the unit, what I need to do, the first step, what I need to be doing is that I need to add, so the first check that I do when I dive onto my diluent, okay, we'll jump over to the big camera real quick. So say for example, when I'm diving on the bailout, when I'm diving on my rebreather, the first thing that it needs to do is it needs to be accessible. Let's see if Matt can throw the big screen, and so he can. All right. So you need to have the unit accessible. So you essentially have both clips. You have our lower clip attached to you, and then you have our shoulder clip attached to your top shoulder. Now, when you're diving on the unit, should the unit be folded? Matt, let's see if we can pull out the big screen, the main camera. There we go. All right. So if you're diving on the unit, how is the mouthpiece, the loop, going to be configured? If it's wrapped up like this, do I have access to the unit in the event of an emergency? No, I don't. So what is the important way to have it? Now, what we have here is we have a clip that we have attached here. This is mostly just for securing the unit if I'm jumping off of a boat, swimming through surf, basically kind of controlling the unit. So what I need to do is I need to have the unit wrapped around on my left shoulder as I'm diving. Why is that? So I need to be able, so if I bail out an emergency, I go to open circuit. So I go to my BOV, or I deploy to a second stage, and then I can get to the loop, inject some gas. Now, why do I want to inject gas before I jump on the loop? If I inject gas, it makes sure that I have something that I can breathe from, and that negative pressure is not going to create a problem. Now, whenever you jump onto a unit underwater, you need to be very, very cautious, because the unit could have a flood, it could have leaked water in, so you need to be ready to prepare in order to get back off of the loop and back to an open circuit regulator. That's why it's important to dive with an open circuit regulator or an open circuit scuba system as well. It makes it more secure and a little bit safer in terms of managing your risk of jumping onto a rebreather. So like I said, as we do our 6-meter check, we want to verify everything is functioning properly. So you can imagine I'm on the loop. I have this mouthpiece sitting on my side, and then I do my 6-meter check. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to see the PO2 in the loop, make sure that it's breathable. I'm going to jump on the loop, add a little bit of diluent, make sure that the rebreather is functioning properly, and then breathe on it in a moment, and then I'll continue to descend. About every 20 feet you should do a check, but you should be doing it quite frequently as you're descending. Because why should you do it while you're descending? Because there's a lot of changes happening at the moment. The loop volume is needing to be maintained. So the ADV is going to be adding gas, right? We're not adding any oxygen in our descent portion of the dive. And so what's important is to make sure is that the integrity of the breathing loop is maintained through the descent portion of the dive. Now, once we get onto the bottom and things are a little bit more stable, you can space out your bailout checks every 15 minutes or so. It depends upon the diver, but you can space out that frequency with a little bit more. You can space it out a little bit more, right? Trying to keep my thought process going. So as we're diving and you're in the bottom portion of your dive, you're just maintaining the loop. Now, remember, I'm not stowing this back here. I need to have access to it. If it's way back there, just might as well not even have it. It's going to be a real pain to get to. Now, what's also important is cord and handset management. If I have 3-4 handsets on one arm, that's going to get very noisy. It's going to be cluttered. I'm not going to have a lot of real estate for that. What we've been starting to see is that we've been seeing divers, what they're starting to do with 2 hands, they'll put both handsets on one arm, but they'll zip tie, or they'll use our Velcro system, our cable cover. You can fit 2 cables in that cover, and you can have both handsets on adjacent sides, right? So you do that so you can easily kind of try as best as you can to have 2 rebreathers on you with 4 handsets. So it's very important to manage that properly. You need to go through the effort of being very streamlined, being very well configured, and you maximize the efficiency of your handset real estate, right? And so if we have a bunch of things on top of each other, it's very easy to confuse what am I looking at, right? So that's something that's very important to manage. Maybe we'll come up with some of our tips and tricks videos. We'll come up with some videos of how to manage the handsets. So, all right. So now, bailing out to your unit. So I have a problem with my primary unit. What's the first unit do I go to? Do I go straight to the bailout CCR? No, I go to open circuit. Okay. Do I sit and stay on open circuit? No, I need to move, right? And so if I go to my BOV and I have my gas plugged into my onboard diluent, how long can I stay on that bottle? Not very long, depending on how deep I am, right? So if I go to my BOV, I need to go to a second stage unless I offboard. But still, in that event, I need to move quickly. So I go to our bailout CCR, right? And then we'll jump over to the small camera, to the close-up camera, to make sure I don't knock anything down. So So we're here in our bailout CCR. So we jumped onto our open circuit, and now we jumped onto our bailout CCR. Add a little bit of dill, open the loop, get on the loop. All right, and all this, you're doing this while you're in perfect trim the entire time, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to click. We click with both buttons, and then dive mode CCR. Now we're in CCR mode. So here at the unit, we get into the green screen. It's a little bit hard to see. But in this screen now, I don't know if you guys can hear it, but the solenoid is firing. Why is the solenoid firing? Because the set point is at 0.4. It's trying to add oxygen into the loop to boost up that PO2. Right, there we go. So we have our main screen. So unless I open the loop, that PO2 is going to stay. So now we are on this unit just as we would on any dive. Now, what about our primary unit that's on our back? What should I do with that? Do I just keep it in whatever it is? No. What I need to do, I'm going to simulate like this is my primary unit, and I swap to my bailout CCR. So now I'm going to go to bailout standby CCR. So why would my primary unit need to go to bailout CCR? So I do that mode so that it can maintain my decompression obligation, right? So that's the important part of this. Now, why don't I just click the unit into bailout open circuit? So if I kick the mode into bailout open circuit, there we go, starting to focus. There we go, bailout mode open circuit. So now it's in bailout open circuit. So I don't think we've talked a lot about this screen, but what this screen does, you can see below this arrow, a little hard to do, bailout gradient factors. So that's something that we haven't talked a lot about, but on our diving, on our setup, we have our main gradient factors, so the main kind of decompression profile we want to have. Now during a bailout, we have our bailout gradient factors. Are those going to be more conservative, or are those going to be the type of gradient factors that we want so that we can get out of the water as quickly as possible? Say, for example, our primary unit, it flooded and we got a caustic, right? So you jump to open circuit, then you jump to your CCR, your backup CCR, and now we're on that unit. You think during a caustic we're going to be very, very, stable and take our time? No. We're going to want to get out of the water as quickly and safely as possible. That's the important part, safely. So with this bailout gradient factor, what this is doing is we have it set to, I think it's about like 80-90 gradient factor. And so what those gradient factors are going to do, we're basically going to get as close to the line of a bubble as safely as possible with a little bit of margin. But what it's doing is it's maximizing our time that we can safely get out of the water. So let's see if this gives us our time to surface screen. Right. So here what we have here is you have your bailout total time to surface, and then you have our total time to surface. So like I said, our bailout total time to surface is how fast what is the least amount of time that I can stay in the water safely, right? So I'm not doing any more diving. I need to get out of the water as quickly as possible. I need to go, go, go. And this is what that bailout total time to surface is. Now, typically when we're diving normally, we're doing multiple days of diving. We're happy dory. We're diving our plane, and we're having regular diving. We're not going to be diving these aggressive gradient factors like a bailout gradient factors. So if you have an emergency and you're bailing out to bailout gradient factors, I'm done diving for the day. I'm done. It's an emergency. You need to get out of the water, right? And then these other keys right here. So this is total time to surface plus 2 minutes, plus 5 minutes, plus 10 minutes. So what this tells me is, oh, I have a problem with I have a reel that's jammed, right? I can spend 2 minutes working on it, and I can see that it may not affect my total time to surface very much. I can spend 5 minutes, and it may boost up my total time to surface 1 minute. But if I spend 10 minutes working out the problem or at depth, that may affect my total time to surface much longer. So these are tools that we can have in our toolbox, in our diving toolbox, that gives us the most amount of information so that we can make a judgment call in the event of a problem or any type of scenario that we may encounter underwater. What Divesoft's goal is to give you the most amount of tools in your, right? And so, yes, in a perfect world, a bailout situation, you should be cool, calm, collected, right? Iceman. But historically, in terms of any type of bailout situation, it's usually you're not having a good time. There's other problems. There's a lot of factors going in. So these are other tools that can help us make a good decision, and so that we can get out of the water safely, because that's our goal, is to get out of the water safely. All right. So this is the open circuit mode. Now, apologize for going into that tangent about the open circuit mode, but so we have our unit as bailout standby. Now remember, we changed our primary unit to a bailout standby, and now we're diving our bailout CCR as our primary unit. So you can see I can do it pretty quickly. So now we're just diving on the rebreather. So we're headed home, right? And so these are the steps and the scenarios of kind of the process that you'll find on using the bailout CCR. Let's see if we can jump over to the main camera. All right, so those are the steps to follow that we talked about on the bailout CCR. Now, those are the skills required to utilize a bailout CCR. Now, if you're using a dual rebreather, it's not necessarily the same as bailout CCR. It's, dual rebreathers like dual tanks, where you're going back and forth between two systems. The bailout system, this is our dedicated bailout unit. So this is our unit that will get us home. Now, it's important that we stress that, you can see that diving on a rebreather adds a lot of factors, a lot of different components that kind of complicate the system in diving more, right? So, the more failure points that we add into a diving system, typically it requires more training, more redundancy, and more experience. Now, just because you go through the training does not necessarily mean you have the right experience to handle the problems that you may encounter when you're utilizing different pieces of equipment. So with the bailout CCR, we really recommend that you gain the right amount of experience and the right kind of training, a combination of experience and training, so that you can properly and safely utilize the side mount rebreather. And just like Jonathan's saying, it's a lot more cleaning, right? And a lot more maintenance, because we're maintaining two rebreather platforms rather than just one. And we already know that one rebreather already has a lot of maintenance and cleaning demands compared to conventional open circuit diving, because we already have our primary unit. Now we have a second unit, and we still have our open circuit system too that we have to maintain and manage on our dive, on top of managing exposure protection, dry suits, wetsuits. Just like we were saying, if you have 4 handsets on your arms, that's going to make for a pretty cluttered system, and that's going to introduce more problems and more factors. So it's important to really gain the right amount of experience before embarking on this kind of diving, right? And right now, bailout CCRs, the conversation's really in the mainstream. And so there's a lot of people talking about it, and it's a really exciting time because the technology is getting better and better. And we're also seeing that the technology it's getting more robust, right? So computers and electronics underwater have more tolerances than they used to have. So it's a really exciting time for the bailout CCR conversation to be starting, or not starting, but to be happening. And so, we definitely like to Divesoft. We definitely are going to be kind of developing this and talking more about it, and getting input from everyone in terms of discussions and conversations. So, I hope that I hope that I was able to answer any type of questions that you guys may have on the Bailout CCR. You got to get a quick look at setting up the Bailout CCR and how it looks on a dive, even though it wasn't going to depth, it wasn't showing deco. But yeah, if you guys have any more questions, we always encourage you guys to reach out to us, send us messages, and always we see a lot of times. What's the best rebreather for me? We always encourage that you try as many rebreathers as you can. We just got back from a demo event in California, Chicago. It was a lot of fun. We got to see a lot of our friends. We had people trying out dual rebreathers and trying out the side mount rebreather. And you can always reach out to like a local instructor, and so that you can demo a unit and just have a conversation and ask questions so that you can learn as much as possible. All right. And be sure to tune in next week. We'll have our dive talks. My next guest is Eduardo Pavia. So he's got some exciting stories to talk about and share with us. If you guys have any other questions or requests, shoot us a message, comment, and be sure to like, share, and I would say subscribe, but it's Facebook. So like, share, and follow us on Facebook. My name is Joe Boscas. Thanks, everybody.